In this lesson, we'll look at the add user command and how to add users with it. So you can see it says it does the same thing as user add. So what's different about it? Well, add user is a script that takes care of several of the things we did before for us. It's also written in Perl, so it's not a binary. So let's see how this is different. So what would we have to do to add a user? Let's try it. Just type sudo add user L Skywalker. Now it's going to ask me for my password because I'm using sudo. And it says it's adding new user L Skywalker, adding a new group L Skywalker, adding a new user with the group L Skywalker. So it put L Skywalker into the new group, creating a home directory, home L Skywalker, and copying files from Etsy's Skell, which we'll learn more about in a future lesson. So it's also asking me for the new password for this new user. So it says passwd updated the password successfully, and now it's asking us for more user information. So it asks us for some information. You don't have to enter anything here. You could just leave all those blank and hit enter all the way through. And then you'll get to this prompt. It says, is the information correct? You can see that the Y is capitalized and the N is lowercase. That means the default is Y. So if we just hit enter here, it does it. So now let's ls/home. And we see that there's an L Skywalker there, right next to D Trump. So let's also look at, we haven't done this yet, but let's look at Etsy group and see what's in there. grep is also a command that we'll be learning a lot more about in future lessons. Okay, it says he's in group 1002, just like it told us. Let's also take a look at D Trump. Okay, so user add did make a group for us. So that's one thing that both do. So that's it. Much streamlined process compared to user add. So the reason I showed you user add first was to show you that there are more steps involved than when you just use add user. And you got to see a kind of manual process. I normally use add user, and you'll probably want to too. The way I remember that is just that add user comes alphabetically before user add. So I want to use the one that's first, add user. In this lesson, we'll learn how to modify users with the usermod command. What if you have to modify a user after creation? You want to add them to a group, for example. Usermod is made for this. You can assign a user to an additional group, lock an account or unlock it, move the home directory, or set an expiration date for the account, to name just a few of the possibilities. In this lesson, we look at how to add a user to the sudo group, giving the user sudo permission, and how to lock and unlock an account using usermod. So we have two different tabs open here in a terminal program called iTerm2. So we can quickly look between them. So let's say you want to add one of your users to the sudo group so they can do sudo or root activities. There are many ways to do that, but the way I like in Ubuntu is to just add the user to the sudo group. And we'll talk more about groups in a later lesson. So to add a user to the sudo group, you type usermod and -a for add, and a capital G for a secondary group. And again, we'll explain more about groups later. Then the name of the group, and then the username. And we have to preface that with sudo. And it took the command. So if we look for L Skywalker in the sudo group, we can do a cat etc group, then grep so we can see that the L Skywalker is in the sudo group and the L Skywalker group. So the user was added. So now let's see if L Skywalker has sudo permissions. We're going to su to L Skywalker. And you can see right off the bat it's telling us that we have sudo permissions. It says to run a command as administrator, use the sudo command. So that worked. So now let's try and lock an account with usermod. So we'll lock dtrump's account. So it's sudo usermod -L dtrump. And then let's try and log in as dtrump over here. And all it says is authentication failure. If I had typed a wrong password, it would have asked me for a password several more times before the authentication would have failed. So we can see that the account is locked. Let's look at how that was accomplished. So the account is still there. And there's still an entry in the etc shadow file. We're going to go over these two files in a couple of lessons. But you can see that in front of the password, there's an exclamation mark. That's a key for Linux to know that that account is locked, that password is locked. So if we unlock the account, it'll take that away and the password will still work. Let's try that. So the command to unlock, as you might guess, is a capital U. Now we can try to log in. And we're logged in. So let's take a look at etc shadow again. And you can see that the exclamation mark is gone. So you could do this manually, but it's kind of risky. You don't want to edit the etc password file manually unless you absolutely have to. So that's it. We saw how to lock and unlock an account and add a user to the sudo group. So those are just 3 of the things you can do with usermod. See you in the next lesson. In this lesson, we'll learn what the etc password file is, how it relates to users, and how it's set up. So there are a lot of files in the etc or etc directory. One of those is the password file, passwd. So the cat command for concatenate will let us see the contents of a file. It'll just print them to the screen. So many of these user accounts are set up by the system. You can see there's even a games user. But the ones we'll be looking at are the ones that we've configured, which would be mine, Theo, my dtrump user. You can see it looks a little different. That was made with user add instead of add user. And L Skywalker, my test account with a whole bunch of data there so we can see the different fields. So etc password file is fields separated by colons. So you can see username. X is where an encrypted version of the password used to be, but that just wasn't safe because everyone can see the etc password file. So that's now stored in etc shadow, which only root can see directly. The user ID, 1000 for mine, 1001 for dtrump, 1002 for Luke. Then we'll jump down here to see what the other fields are. Now this is actually all one big field. Everything separated by commas is part of one field. So it has name, the full name of the user, the room number, work phone, home phone, and other information. Next is the home directory for the user. And then the shell they're supposed to have at login. You can see the dtrump who we set up with user add doesn't have a shell prescribed. So he'll get a default. So the best way to typically modify this is through usermod or through user add or add user. You wouldn't want to edit this directly unless you had the needs for some reason, and you still wouldn't want to edit it directly with the file editor. There's a special command you use to edit this file. It's called vipw, vi password. So vipw lets you edit the password, group, shadow password, or shadow group files. And it does it in a way that should keep it from getting corrupted. If this file gets corrupt, you'll have a very difficult time getting on your server. You may have to boot into single user mode to recover it. But let's try not to have to worry about that. So if you use vipw, it'll place the correct lock on the file, and it'll make sure that it doesn't become corrupted. If 2 people try to edit this at once, and you weren't using vipw, if they were using regular text editors, that file could become corrupt, and you could be locked out of your system until you figure out a way around it. So use vipw to edit the etc password file, and vipw-s to edit the shadow file. And again, you generally wouldn't want to edit the shadow file manually. You can manage users through usermod. vigr is for editing the group file, which we're going to go over in a later lesson. And vigr-s is for editing the group shadow file. Okay, so let's clear the screen. And we'll use vipw. By default, when you use vipw, it will open the file with Nano, the Nano text editor. You can tell you're in Nano because it says Nano up here in the upper left. And you have a kind of a text menu down here at the bottom. The little caret character, the little upward facing arrow, means to hit Control. So you'd hit Control G to get help, Control X to exit, and Control O to write out or write. You'll cover all these commands in much greater detail in an upcoming lesson on Nano Text Editor. And you'll cover its main alternative, Vim, in another lesson. For right now, I just want to let you see how to navigate and do some really simple commands with them. So we scroll down to the bottom of the file. You can see there's dtrump here. If we wanted to delete dtrump, and we want to do it by editing the etc password file, we can just delete dtrump by hitting Control K while we're on that line. Please don't be confused if the users are out of order on your screen. We're going to look at that in a few minutes when we look at this through Vim. So hit Control K to delete dtrump. Hit Control O to write. We'll keep the name the same. And hit Control X to exit. When we edit the file in this way, we can see that the password file and the shadow file become out of sync. We've removed dtrump from etc password, but he still exists in etc shadow. We'd have to use VIPW-S to edit the shadow file to remove that user now. This exercise was just to show you how these things interact. If we do a tail, just showing the last 10 lines on etc password, we can see that dtrump is no longer there. So now let's take a look at how to do this in Vim. So we'll remove dtrump. You just hit DD in Vim to delete a line. And then we'll exit without saving, so he won't really be deleted. But you can see that you could have just deleted that. The commands you hit are escape, :, Q, ! to get out without saving. So it says no changes were made. The VIPW, etc password is unchanged. So the proper way would be to delete the account using del user or user del, which is similar in concept to add user and user add. Del user is a Perl script that gives you some additional things you can do more easily when you're deleting a user. And user del is the lower level command that del user calls. So we'll cover those in a future lesson. But for now, you understand the etc password file and the fields that are in it. Next, we'll take a look at the etc shadow file.